The sun was starting to slip behind the trees when Luke spotted her. At first, it was just a flash of white against the deep green of the wilderness, a figure stumbling along the narrow trail, one hand clutching her leg. Luke had been out here for days, hiking alone, trying to shake off the noise of the world. He hadn't expected to see another soul, especially not someone in trouble. Without thinking, he broke into a run, his boots pounding the rough earth beneath him. When he reached her, she had collapsed onto a patch of dry grass, her face pale and sweating. Her breath came in short, painful gasps. That's when he saw it. 2 small puncture marks just above her boot. Snake bite. Luke's stomach dropped. Out here, miles from any town or hospital, a bite like that could be deadly. He dropped to his knees beside her. Hey, stay with me," he said, keeping his voice calm even though his heart was racing. "I'm gonna help you, okay?" She looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes, but she managed a small nod. Her skin was already clammy to the touch. Luke tore off his bandana and tied it just above the bite, trying to slow the venom spread. He knew it wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Then he scooped her up in his arms, careful not to jostle her too much, and started back down the trail the way he had come. There was an old ranger station a few miles west, abandoned now, but maybe, just maybe, there was a radio he could use to call for help. As he moved, she drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes whispering words he couldn't quite make out. Her name, he gathered, was Eva. Beyond that, she said little, except for one strange thing she muttered over and over. "They can't find me. They can't find me." Luke didn't have time to make sense of it. Every step was a battle against exhaustion, but he pushed forward, fueled by the knowledge that her life might depend on it. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees growing thicker, the shadows deeper. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, and the last of the sunlight disappeared, leaving them in a twilight world of grays and blacks. At last, the ranger station came into view, a crumbling building half swallowed by vines. Luke kicked open the door and laid Eva down on the dusty floor. His hands shook as he searched the place. By some miracle, the old radio was still there, perched on a cracked wooden desk. He said a silent prayer and turned the knob. Static. Then faintly a voice crackled through. "This is Ranger Post 7. Come in if you can hear me." Luke grabbed the mic. "This is an emergency. I've got a woman here, snake bite, she needs help. We're at the old station near Ironwood Ridge." The voice on the other end sounded surprised. "Copy that. Stay put. We're sending a medic team your way." Relief washed over Luke so hard he had to sit down for a moment. He looked over at Eva. Her breathing was shallow, but she was alive. That was something. Hours passed. Luke kept her warm, kept talking to her to make sure she didn't drift too far. Little by little, she began to come around. Her voice was hoarse when she finally spoke clearly. "You shouldn't have helped me," she whispered. Luke frowned. "What are you talking about? You don't know who I am." "Doesn't matter," he said. "You needed help." A faint, sad smile touched her lips. "You'll wish you hadn't." Before he could ask what she meant, headlights flared outside. The medic team had arrived, but there was something odd about them. 2 men in uniforms, sure, but they moved a little too quickly, their faces too serious. Luke brushed it off. Paranoia, probably. He helped load Eva into the stretcher. As they prepared to drive off, one of the men pulled Luke aside. His tone was low, almost conspiratorial. "You have no idea who you just saved, do you?" Luke shook his head, uneasy. "I just found her in the woods." The man gave him a long, measuring look. "That's no ordinary woman. She's the heiress to Fort Briarwood." Luke blinked. "Fort Briarwood? That abandoned place up north?" The man snorted. "Abandoned? Hardly. That fort sits on a fortune. Land resources, old money. People have killed for less." Luke's mouth went dry. He watched as the ambulance roared away into the night, taking Eva with it. The man clapped a hand on his shoulder before disappearing into the darkness, leaving Luke standing alone under the cold, starless sky. Questions swirled through his mind. Why had Eva been running? Who was she so afraid of? And now that he had helped her, was he somehow part of whatever trouble she was in? Luke turned to look back at the silent forest. Somewhere beyond those trees lay answers, and maybe dangers he hadn't even begun to imagine. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of a choice settling heavy on his chest. Walk away and pretend this night never happened. Or dive deeper into a mystery that had already pulled him in too far to escape. As the first raindrops began to fall, Luke knew he was already too involved. The real question was, what would he find when he went looking for the truth? And more importantly, would he survive it? The rain was falling harder now, a steady rhythm tapping against the worn roof of the ranger station. Luke stayed inside for a while, listening, thinking. The words of the medic, or whoever he really was, kept running through his mind. Heiress, fortune, people killed for less. He didn't know much about Fort Briarwood beyond the local legends. Stories of an old fort turned private estate, tucked deep in the wilderness, surrounded by miles of untouched land. Some said it had been abandoned years ago after the last owner vanished without a trace. Others whispered that it was cursed, that no one who went there ever came back the same. Luke had always dismissed it as just talk. But now he wasn't so sure. He couldn't shake the image of Eva, lying pale and broken on the forest floor. And the way she had looked at him, not just scared but haunted. Whatever she was running from, it wasn't just about land or money. Felt bigger, darker. By morning Luke made up his mind. He wasn't the kind of guy to walk away from something like this. Not when someone's life, maybe his own, was tangled up in it. He packed his gear, tightened the laces of his boots, and headed toward the small town at the edge of the forest. Maybe someone there knew more about Fort Briarwood. About Eva. About why saving her felt like stepping into a storm he couldn't yet see. The town of Dry Creek wasn't much. A few dusty streets, a diner, a post office, a gas station that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. Luke made his way to the diner first, figuring coffee and local gossip might be a good starting point. The bell over the door jingled as he stepped inside. Heads turned briefly. Newcomers always drew attention here, but most people went back to their meals. Luke slid into a booth by the window. A woman in her 50s, wearing a faded apron and a warm but tired smile, came over. "Morning, stranger. Coffee, please," Luke said. "And maybe some information if you've got it." She poured him a cup, setting it down with a soft clink. "Depends what you're looking for." Luke hesitated, then said carefully, "Fort Briarwood." The woman's hand froze halfway to her apron pocket. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of conversation and the rain drumming against the windows. "You don't want to go poking around there," she said finally. Her voice was low, almost a warning. "Briarwood's bad news. Always has been." "I heard it's abandoned," Luke said, testing the waters. She gave a small, humorless laugh. "That's what they want you to think. But there's people up there. Old families, old feuds, land deals that went bad decades ago. Some folks say there's a whole world hidden behind those gates. Secrets worth killing for." Luke sipped his coffee, the bitterness grounding him. "You ever hear of a woman named Eva? Might be connected to the place." The waitress stiffened. She leaned in closer, her voice barely a whisper now. "Eva Briarwood." Luke nodded slowly. "So it's true." "Lord help you, son," she said, straightening up and backing away. "If you're tangled up with that girl, you're already in deeper than you know." She left him with that, disappearing into the kitchen. Luke sat there for a long time, watching the rain blur the view outside. Eva Briarwood, heiress to the fort, running scared in the woods. And him, just some guy who happened to be in the right place at the wrong time. Or maybe the wrong place at exactly the right time. By the time he finished his coffee, Luke had decided on his next move. If Eva was in trouble, real trouble, he needed to find her before whoever she was running from did. The medic team from last night hadn't exactly inspired trust. And if Fort Briarwood was as dangerous as everyone hinted, she might not be safe in their hands. He headed back to his truck and drove toward the outskirts of town, where the road turned from pavement to dirt, and the forest seemed to grow thicker with every mile. The closer he got to the fort, the more the world seemed to change. The trees grew taller, older, their gnarled branches reaching out like twisted fingers. Fog clung low to the ground, swirling around the tires. Even the air felt heavier, like it was carrying secrets. Luke found the turnoff almost by accident, a narrow, overgrown path barely visible from the main road. A rusted sign, half buried in weeds, read, "Briarwood Estate." He turned down it, the truck bumping along the uneven trail. After about a mile, the forest opened up into a wide clearing. And there it was, Fort Briarwood. It wasn't what he expected. Not some crumbling ruin, but a massive stone fortress, its high walls lined with barbed wire, its heavy iron gates chained shut. The place looked alive in a strange, unsettling way. Lights glowed faintly in some of the windows. Movement, a shadow, a figure, flickered past the corner of his vision. Luke killed the engine and sat for a moment, heart pounding. Getting inside wouldn't be easy. And if Eva was being held here, getting her out would be even harder. He got out of the truck and approached the gates, his boots sinking slightly into the muddy ground. Up close, he could see fresh tire tracks leading in and out. Someone had been here recently. Maybe those same men from the ranger station. Maybe worse. As he studied the gates, he noticed something else. A scrap of fabric caught on the chain. Pale blue. The same color as the jacket Eva had been wearing. Luke reached through the bars and tugged it free, his fingers brushing something else. A small, thin slip of paper folded tight. He pulled it out and opened it carefully. 3 words, scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Don't trust them." The sound of an engine rumbled in the distance. Luke's instincts screamed at him to move. He stuffed the fabric and the note into his jacket and backed away from the gate, slipping into the trees just as a black SUV came into view. It rolled to a stop in front of the fort. 2 men got out, not the medics from before, but different, rougher-looking types. One of them glanced around warily, hand resting near the gun tucked under his coat. Luke crouched low behind a tree, his breath shallow. His mind raced. If Eva had left that note, it meant she was still alive, still fighting, and she needed help more than ever. But getting her out of Fort Briarwood was going to be a lot more dangerous than he had ever imagined. And something told him the worst was yet to come. Luke stayed low, his body pressed against the damp earth, watching as the 2 men checked the gates and talked in hushed voices. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but the way they moved, quick, aggressive, checking over their shoulders, told him everything he needed to know. They weren't here to help Eva. They were here to make sure she didn't leave. The black SUV idled at the entrance, its headlights slicing through the mist. Luke counted the seconds, waiting for the right moment. Then, as one of the men wandered toward the woods, he slipped deeper into the trees, careful not to make a sound. He needed a plan. Charging in would get him killed. Maybe Eva too. Fort Briarwood wasn't just some abandoned old place. It was guarded, fortified, like someone was hiding more than just a scared girl behind those walls. Luke's mind raced. He needed help. But who could he trust? Dry Creek wasn't exactly crawling with good Samaritans, and after the medic team from last night, he wasn't taking chances. Back at the truck, he yanked out an old map from the glove compartment. His finger traced the lines, searching for another way in. According to the map, there was a service road that looped behind the property, probably used back when the fort was a working estate. If it still existed, it might be overgrown, hidden, but it could be his way inside. He folded the map and started driving, headlights off, sticking to the shadows. The forest grew even thicker as he circled the fort. Every so often he caught glimpses of the stone walls through the trees, and once, he thought he saw someone standing on the ramparts, a lone figure watching the woods. Luke pressed on, heart hammering. He finally found what he was looking for, a narrow, rutted path barely wide enough for his truck. The entrance was marked by a sagging wooden post and a long-forgotten chain. It looked like no one had used it in years. He left the truck behind and continued on foot, stepping carefully to avoid branches and dry leaves. The rain had turned the ground to muck, and his boots squelched with every step. After what felt like an hour, he saw it, a break in the wall. An old maintenance gate, the lock rusted through, hanging uselessly from the frame. He pushed it open slowly, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the fort was a maze of crumbling stone corridors and overgrown courtyards. The main building loomed ahead, a massive, fortress-like mansion with dark, shuttered windows. Lights flickered inside, casting strange, shifting shadows across the walls. Luke moved carefully, sticking to the edges, listening. Somewhere a door slammed. Voices echoed, angry, urgent. He edged closer, ducking behind a crumbling statue. Two men were arguing just inside the main hall. Luke could barely make out their words. "She's still in the East Wing," one said. "Boss says she stays put until the paperwork clears. And if someone comes looking..." The first man laughed coldly. "Won't matter. By then it'll be too late." Luke felt a chill crawl up his spine. Paperwork. East Wing. They were holding Eva here, waiting for something. Maybe to force her to sign something. Maybe worse. He needed to find her. As he crept along the side of the building, he caught sight of another figure. A young boy, maybe 12 or 13, sitting on the edge of a broken fountain. He looked out of place. Too clean, too alert. Their eyes met for a split second before the boy motioned quickly for Luke to stay low. Luke hesitated, then ducked behind a stone pillar. A few seconds later, he heard soft footsteps and turned to find the boy crouching beside him. "You're here for her, aren't you?" the boy whispered. Luke nodded, unsure if he should trust him. "They'll kill her once they get what they want," the boy said, voice trembling. "You have to move fast." "Who are you?" Luke whispered back. "My name's Ben. I'm supposed to be part of the staff here. But I don't like what they're doing. I heard them talking." Luke studied him. Skinny, scared, but telling the truth. He could feel it. "Can you get me to her?" Luke asked. Ben nodded. "Follow me. But we have to be careful. There's more of them inside than you think." Luke followed Ben through a series of narrow hallways and hidden passages, the old fort groaning and creaking around them. Every sound made Luke's heart jump. They passed rooms filled with old furniture covered in sheets, broken paintings, and dusty chandeliers. The place smelled of mildew and something sour, something that set Luke's nerves on edge. At last, they reached a heavy wooden door tucked behind a faded tapestry. Ben pressed a finger to his lips, then motioned for Luke to wait. The boy slipped inside, returning a moment later with a grim nod. "She's in there. But she's weak." Luke pushed the door open carefully. Inside, Eva was slumped against the wall, her wrists bound, her face pale under the flickering light. "Eva!" he said softly, rushing to her side. Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment she looked confused, afraid. Then she recognized him. "Luke," she whispered. "You shouldn't have come." "I wasn't going to leave you," he said, starting to work at the ropes. "We're getting out of here." "No," she said urgently, grabbing his hand. "You don't understand. It's not just about me. They're after the fort. They want control, for the land, for what's underneath." Luke frowned. "What do you mean?" But before she could answer, a loud shout echoed down the hall. Ben's eyes widened in terror. "They know we're here." Luke pulled Eva to her feet, slinging her arm over his shoulder. They stumbled into the corridor, Ben leading the way. Heavy boots pounded on the stone floor behind them. Voices shouted. Flashlights sliced through the darkness. They ran. Through the twisting halls, through half-collapsed corridors. Down stairwells so old the stones crumbled underfoot. Luke's lungs burned, and Eva sagged heavier against him with every step, but he didn't stop. They burst through a side door and into the overgrown courtyard. Luke could see the broken maintenance gate up ahead, their only chance. But between them and freedom were at least 4 men, spreading out to block the way. Ben skidded to a halt. "There's another way," he gasped. "Through the catacombs under the fort. But it's dangerous. If you get lost down there." Luke didn't hesitate. "Show me." Ben turned and led them toward a crumbling stairwell hidden behind a collapsed wall. As they disappeared into the darkness, the men behind them shouted in fury. Gunshots rang out, echoing through the night. The last thing Luke saw before the shadows swallowed them was the fort, looming high above, silent, ancient, and filled with secrets that weren't ready to let them go. The darkness of the catacombs swallowed them whole, the air cold and damp, thick with the smell of earth and old stone. Luke kept a firm grip on Eva as they moved, her weight growing heavier with each step. Ben scampered ahead, his small flashlight barely piercing the blackness. Every sound seemed magnified down here. Their breathing, the scrape of boots against stone, distant voices shouting above them. The tunnels twisted and turned in ways that made no sense. Old passageways from when Fort Briarwood was still a military stronghold. Luke could feel the centuries pressing in on him, the sense that this place was never meant for escape, but for trapping enemies underground. The walls were covered in strange markings, old symbols and faded carvings that Luke barely registered. His mind focused on staying alive. Somewhere behind them, the men were giving chase, their flashlights slicing through the cracks and gaps in the stone. Ben led them through a narrow archway, the ceiling so low Luke had to duck. The ground sloped downward sharply, and Luke nearly lost his footing on the slick stones. His heart pounded louder than the footsteps behind them. Eva clung to him, her breathing shallow but determined. "There's a way out," Ben panted. "It leads to the old riverbed. But we have to move fast." Luke nodded, though he wasn't sure the boy could even see him in the dim light. They pressed on, deeper into the labyrinth. The air grew colder, almost biting. Luke's mind flashed back to Eva's words, that it wasn't just about the fort, but what was underneath. Was she talking about these tunnels? Was there something even worse hiding down here? As if to answer him, the ground suddenly rumbled under their feet. A low groaning sound echoed through the tunnels, like something ancient shifting in the dark. Dust rained from the ceiling. Ben stopped, his face pale. "It's starting," Eva whispered, her voice filled with dread. Luke didn't know what it was, but he knew they didn't want to stick around to find out. They pushed forward, the sound of footsteps behind them growing louder, closer. Voices barked orders. "Find them! Don't let them reach the river." Ben led them down another tight corridor, but this one was different. The air smelled fresher here, damp but alive. Luke could hear the faint trickle of water up ahead. The riverbed. Hope surged through him, giving him the strength to half-carry Eva through the winding passage. They were almost there when a flashlight beam caught them from behind. A voice roared, and a gunshot cracked through the tunnel, the bullet sparking off the stone inches from Luke's head. He ducked instinctively, shoving Eva and Ben ahead of him. "Move!" he shouted. They stumbled into a larger cavern, the ceiling soaring above them in jagged arches. The river, or what remained of it, snaked through the center, a shallow, muddy stream glinting under Ben's flickering flashlight. Across the water, Luke could see another tunnel, leading up and out into the woods beyond. Freedom was so close he could almost taste it. But between them and that tunnel were 3 figures, blocking their way, armed, waiting. Luke scanned the cavern desperately. To his right, a crumbling ledge climbed up along the wall. If they could reach it, maybe they could find a way around. But Eva wasn't in any shape to climb, and Ben was just a kid. They were trapped. The footsteps behind them grew louder. More flashlights. More voices. Luke's mind raced. They couldn't fight their way out. They couldn't outrun bullets. But maybe they could outsmart them. He turned to Ben. "You know these tunnels better than they do, right?" Ben nodded, fear in his wide eyes. "Then find us another way. Fast." Ben darted off to the left, disappearing into the shadows. Luke tightened his grip on Eva, pulling her with him, trusting Ben's instincts. A bullet whizzed past them, striking the wall and showering them with chips of stone. Eva stumbled but kept going, her strength fueled by sheer will. They ducked into a narrow crack between two slabs of rock just as the men from the fort burst into the cavern. Luke could hear them shouting, arguing. They didn't know which way he and Eva had gone. Ben reappeared a few feet ahead, waving frantically. Luke followed, heart hammering. They squeezed through the tight space, crawling over jagged rocks, the tunnel growing steeper as it climbed upward. The roar of the river faded behind them, replaced by the creaks and groans of the ancient fort above. As they climbed, Luke caught flashes of strange carvings on the walls, symbols he didn't recognize, but that sent a shiver down his spine. He remembered what the waitress in Dry Creek had said about old feuds and secrets. This place wasn't just a fort. It was a vault, a tomb for something far older than any land deal or inheritance. They burst out into another chamber, smaller but no less intimidating. A heavy stone door stood at the far end, half buried under rubble. Ben rushed to it, tugging at the rusted handle. "It leads outside," he hissed. "But it's stuck." Luke set Eva down gently, propping her against the wall. Then he threw his weight against the door. It groaned but didn't budge. Another gunshot rang out behind them, a bullet zipping past and embedding in the stone near Luke's head. Ben ducked and screamed. Luke gritted his teeth and slammed into the door again, feeling the old stone shift slightly under the pressure. One more time. One chance. He backed up, sucked in a breath and charged. The door gave way with a deafening crack, collapsing outward into the night. Fresh air rushed in, cool and clean and full of pine and rain. Luke grabbed Eva and pulled her through the opening. Ben scrambled after them. They spilled out onto a grassy slope just beyond the fort walls, the dark forest stretching ahead like a promise of safety. But they weren't safe yet. Behind them, the men poured out of the broken door, shouting. Flashlights danced wildly across the ground. Another shot fired, kicking up dirt at Luke's heels. Luke hauled Eva up, half carrying her down the slope. Ben raced ahead, scouting the path. The forest was dense, offering cover but also making it easy to get lost. They had to move fast, stay ahead, find somewhere to hide before the men closed the distance. Branches whipped against Luke's face. Mud sucked at his boots. Eva was getting heavier, her breaths shallow, her body trembling with effort. "Just a little farther," he urged her, though he didn't know how far they had to go. A sudden roar split the night, not human but deep, guttural and terrifying. Luke froze, heart pounding in his ears. The men chasing them stopped too. Confusion rippled through their ranks. Ben turned back, terror written across his young face. "It's the Guardian," he whispered. "The what?" Luke rasped, barely able to catch his breath. "The thing under the fort," Ben said, voice trembling. "It's awake." In the distance, through the misty trees, Luke saw something moving. Massive. Shadows twisting unnaturally. The men behind them opened fire, not at Luke and Eva, but at whatever was coming from the fort. Their shouts turned to screams. Luke didn't wait to see more. He tightened his grip on Eva and ran, following Ben into the dark woods, as something ancient and furious rose behind them, shaking the very earth they fled across. Luke stumbled through the dense woods, branches clawing at his arms as he half-carried Eva behind Ben. His lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he didn't dare slow down. Behind them, the forest shook with the sounds of something massive tearing through the trees. Gunfire echoed again, sharper this time, mixed with the unmistakable cries of men realizing too late they were up against something they didn't understand. Luke didn't look back. He couldn't. Every instinct told him that whatever was back there wasn't just dangerous, it was unstoppable. Ben led them down a ravine, the ground slick with mud and fallen leaves. The boy moved like he knew every rock and root by heart, a silver streak in the darkness. Luke tightened his grip on Eva. Her head lolled against his shoulder, her skin ice cold. They needed to stop. She needed help. But stopping meant getting caught, either by the men from Fort Briarwood or by whatever had just been unleashed from the tunnels. They scrambled up the other side of the ravine and ducked behind a fallen tree, gasping for breath. For a moment, there was only the sound of their breathing and the distant, rumbling growls from behind. Luke gently set Eva down, brushing the hair from her face. Her eyes fluttered open, dazed but aware. "We have to keep moving," she whispered, her voice paper-thin. "I know," Luke said, squeezing her hand. "But you need a minute." Ben crouched beside them, peering back toward the fort. His small face was tight with fear. "It's not just the Guardian," he said in a low voice. "There's more." Luke frowned. "What do you mean, more?" Ben swallowed hard. "There's a reason they never let anyone near the fort. It's not just about the land or the inheritance. Eva's family. They were guarding something powerful. And now it's free." Before Luke could ask more, the earth beneath them trembled again, and from the direction of the fort came a new sound. Not the roar of a creature, but the deep, resonant blare of a horn. Ancient and hollow. It sent a chill through Luke's bones. Eva tried to sit up, her strength returning just enough to whisper, "The signal." Ben nodded, his face grim. "It's calling the others." Luke's mind raced. "Others? What others?" Eva's voice shook. "There are old families tied to the fort. My ancestors. They took an oath centuries ago to keep the Guardian locked away. If the signal sounds, it wakes the bloodlines." Luke stared at her, heart thudding. This wasn't just about greed or land disputes anymore. This was something older, something darker. And now he was caught in the middle of it. A sudden rustling in the trees made them all freeze. Luke turned, expecting more soldiers or maybe another creature. But what stepped out of the shadows was something else entirely. A man, tall and gaunt, dressed in old-fashioned clothes that looked like they belonged in another century. His eyes were sharp and unsettling, and he carried a long, ornate staff carved with strange symbols. Around his neck hung a medallion, glinting in the faint light filtering through the trees. Ben gasped and shrank back. "You carry the mark," the man said, his voice deep and echoing. He pointed the staff at Eva. "You cannot run from your blood." Luke instinctively stepped between Eva and the stranger. "Stay back." The man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "You don't understand," he said. "None of you do. The Guardian isn't what you should fear. It's what the Guardian was keeping asleep." A heavy silence fell over the forest, broken only by the far-off roar of the creature still rampaging near the fort. Luke's mind spun. What was it keeping asleep? The man's smile widened, almost pitying. "The true heir," he said. "And now she's waking up." Eva's face drained of color. She tried to rise but collapsed back against the tree, trembling. Ben clutched at Luke's sleeve. "We have to go. Now." The man didn't move to stop them, only watched with that unsettling smile as they scrambled to their feet. Luke lifted Eva again, following Ben deeper into the woods. The man's words burned in Luke's mind. The true heir. Waking up. They ran through the trees until they reached a clearing where a broken-down shack sat under the looming pines. Ben pointed. "We can hide there." Luke carried Eva inside, the door creaking on rusted hinges. Dust filled the air. The place looked abandoned for decades, but it would have to do. He laid Eva down on a rickety old cot and turned to Ben. "What aren't you telling me?" Ben hesitated, his small hands twisting nervously. "The fort. It was built on top of an ancient burial ground. The Guardian was bound there to protect a secret, an ancient power tied to Eva's family. That's why the land matters. That's why they chased her. They weren't trying to kill her. They were trying to control her." Luke stared at him. "Control her how?" Ben looked at Eva, tears brimming in his eyes. "She's more than just the heiress to a fort. She's the key." Before Luke could ask more, a sudden gust of wind slammed against the shack, rattling the windows. The horn blared again in the distance, louder now, closer. and from deep within the woods, figures began to emerge. Not soldiers, not hunters, but men and women dressed in dark cloaks, their faces hidden, moving with eerie coordination toward the shack. Luke's heart pounded. He didn't know what these people wanted exactly, but he knew they weren't here to help. Eva stirred on the cot, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Ben backed away, fear plain on his face. "It's starting," he whispered. Luke positioned himself between the door and Eva, ready to fight if he had to. But deep down, he knew fists wouldn't stop whatever was coming. Outside, the figures surrounded the shack, chanting in low, rhythmic voices that made the ground itself seem to pulse with each word. The old man with the staff appeared again, standing at the front of the crowd. His voice rose over the chanting. "The blood of the fort must choose," he declared. "Will she bind the darkness, or set it free?" Luke tightened his fists, his mind racing for a plan. He didn't know what Eva would choose. He wasn't sure she even knew. But one thing was certain, whatever choice she made, there would be no going back. Luke's heart hammered against his ribs as the cloaked figures closed in, their chanting building into a terrible, hypnotic rhythm. He looked down at Eva, still lying weakly on the cot, her face pale, her breathing shallow. But something in her had shifted. That faint glow in her eyes had grown stronger, and now it pulsed with the rhythm of the chanting, almost like she was connected to them somehow. Ben gripped Luke's sleeve, whispering desperately, "You have to stop them. If they finish the ritual, Eva won't be herself anymore." Luke didn't know what he could possibly do against a group like this, but he knew he couldn't just stand there. He took a deep breath and stepped toward the door, positioning himself between Eva and the advancing crowd. The old man with the staff raised his hand, and instantly the chanting stopped. A heavy silence fell over the clearing. "You cannot protect her from what she is," the old man said, his voice low but carrying easily through the thick, tense air. "She must choose." Luke shook his head. "She's not choosing anything while you're threatening her." The man smiled, that same unsettling smile. "We do not threaten. We guide." Behind Luke, Eva stirred again, her voice hoarse but clear. "Luke. Let me." Luke turned to her, uncertain, but she gave him a small nod. There was a steadiness in her eyes now, something stronger than before. It wasn't fear, it was something deeper, like she was finally waking up to what had always been inside her. Slowly, Luke stepped aside, and Eva pushed herself up, wobbling to her feet. She looked so fragile standing there, but there was a quiet power gathering around her, lifting her hair and clothes as if stirred by a silent wind. The old man lowered his staff and bowed his head. "Daughter of the fort, keeper of the seal, choose." Eva's eyes locked onto his, unflinching. For a long moment no one moved. Then Eva stepped forward, past Luke, past Ben, until she stood at the threshold of the shack. "I choose freedom," she said. The old man's eyes widened, just a flicker, but it was enough. The cloaked figures stirred uncomfortably, murmuring among themselves. "You would unbind what has been kept locked for centuries?" he asked, voice trembling. Eva smiled faintly, but there was nothing soft about it. "I choose to end it. Not to release it. Not to rule it. To destroy it." Before anyone could react, she raised her hand, and the faint glow in her eyes exploded outward. A shock wave of light tore through the clearing, throwing the cloaked figures back like leaves in a storm. Luke stumbled, shielding Ben with his body, but even he could feel the force of it rattling his bones. The old man screamed, a sound not entirely human, as the medallion around his neck shattered into dust. The staff he held splintered and cracked, and the earth beneath him split open, swallowing him whole before slamming shut as if nothing had ever been there. The chanting stopped. The forest fell deathly silent. Eva collapsed to her knees, breathing hard. Luke rushed to her, catching her before she could fall. Around them, the surviving cloaked figures scrambled to their feet, panic clear in their movements. They fled into the woods without a second glance. Their mission failed. Ben crept up, wide-eyed, staring at Eva like she was some kind of miracle. You You broke the oath, he whispered. Eva gave a tired smile. Maybe it was time someone did. Luke helped her stand, wrapping an arm around her for support. Together they stepped out into the clearing, the heavy air finally lifting. The darkness that had clung to the trees seemed to dissolve, leaving only the whisper of the wind and the faint chirp of crickets returning to life. Luke looked down at her, still trying to process everything that had just happened. Is it over? Eva looked back at the ruined fort in the distance, the towers crumbling into the earth. For now, she said, the land is free. No more guardians. No more chains. They started back through the woods, the morning light beginning to filter through the trees. Luke felt a strange hope rising in him, something he hadn't dared feel in a long time. But just as they crested a hill overlooking the valley, Ben, who had been walking ahead, stopped dead in his tracks. Luke, he said, his voice shaking. Look. Luke followed his gaze and felt his stomach drop. In the valley below, where the ruins of Fort Briarwood lay, something was moving. Not soldiers, not cloaked figures. Something bigger, something ancient, rising from beneath the earth where the fort once stood. It wasn't the Guardian. It wasn't human. It was something far older, something that had been sleeping long before Eva's family ever built the fort. Eva's hand gripped Luke's tightly, her face pale again. We didn't destroy it, she whispered. We only woke it. The ground shook beneath their feet, and a low, rumbling roar rolled through the valley like thunder. Luke tightened his grip on Eva's hand, his mind racing. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. The earth kept trembling beneath their feet as Luke, Eva, and Ben watched the valley below. Whatever had been buried under Fort Briarwood was no longer sleeping. It rose slowly, a hulking mass of rock and shadow, pulling pieces of the broken fort into itself like armor. The roar that came from it wasn't just sound. It felt like it shook their very bones. Luke tightened his arm around Eva, feeling her body tense against his side. Ben clung to Luke's free hand, his small fingers trembling. For a moment none of them spoke. There were no more plans, no more hiding places. Just the truth standing wide and terrible before them. The Guardian had been a distraction. The real danger had been sleeping underneath them all along. We can't fight that, Ben whispered, voice shaking with fear. Luke looked at Eva. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp with determination. She seemed to stand taller now, the weight of what she was realizing settling on her shoulders. We don't have to fight it, Eva said quietly. We just have to end it. Luke frowned. How? It looks unstoppable. Eva turned to him, her gaze steady. My family didn't just build the fort to protect the land. They built it to contain this thing. There's a second seal. One the others didn't know about. Ben's eyes widened. Where? Eva looked toward the rising sun. The river. There's an ancient well hidden at the bend. If we can get there. If I can finish what my ancestors started. We can lock it away for good. Luke didn't question her. He just nodded. Lead the way. They scrambled down the hill, slipping on loose rocks and tangled roots. The monster in the valley moved slowly but surely, pulling itself free of the ruins, and with every step it took, the land trembled. Trees cracked and fell. The birds that had once sung at dawn were silent now. As they ran, Eva explained between gasps for air. The well was the original seal. My great-great-grandmother was the last one who knew how to activate it. They kept the knowledge hidden, even from the rest of the family, to protect it. Ben panted beside them. What do you have to do? Eva looked grim. Blood. It always comes down to blood. The river finally came into view, a shining silver ribbon cutting through the woods. At the bend Eva had mentioned, an ancient stone well stood hidden among tall grasses, moss-covered and forgotten. They stumbled toward it, Luke helping Eva stay on her feet. The ground shook harder now. They could hear the creature crashing through the trees behind them, getting closer. Eva pressed her hand against the well's stones, closing her eyes. Luke watched as a faint blue light began to shimmer under her touch, like the stones themselves were waking up after a long sleep. You need to hurry, Luke urged. Eva nodded. She pulled a small knife from the inside of her jacket, something Luke hadn't even realized she was carrying. Without hesitating, she cut a shallow line across her palm and pressed it against the stones. The light flared, racing through the cracks and carvings like veins of fire. Behind them, the creature let out another deafening roar. Luke turned and saw it through the trees, close enough now to see the strange ancient symbols etched across its rocky hide. Eva whispered something Luke couldn't understand, an old language, thick and strange. The well responded with a low, thrumming hum that vibrated in Luke's chest. The creature charged. Luke grabbed Ben and shoved him behind the well, shielding him as much as he could. He could see Eva's knees buckling, her face white with strain. "Come on, Eva," Luke whispered. "You can do this." The well's light burst outward in a wave, just as the creature reached the clearing. It slammed into an invisible wall of force and howled in rage. The ground split around it, and tendrils of glowing light wrapped around its limbs, dragging it back toward the well. Eva cried out, falling to her knees, but she kept her hand pressed firmly against the stones. The creature fought, pulling at the bindings, but the well's magic was too strong. Slowly, inch by inch, it was dragged back, roaring and thrashing. Luke wanted to run to Eva to help her, but he knew the only thing he could do was stay out of the way and let her finish what she started. At last, with one final, earth-shaking roar, the creature was yanked into the ground, the earth closing over it like a wound healing. The light from the well pulsed one last time, then faded into a soft glow. The ground stilled. The air grew quiet. It was over. Eva collapsed, and Luke rushed to catch her. She was unconscious but breathing. Relief and pride flooded through him. Ben emerged from behind the well, his eyes wide. "She did it," he whispered. Luke smiled, exhausted but grateful beyond words. "Yeah," he said softly. "She did." They carried Eva back to the edge of the woods where Luke's old truck was still hidden. The land felt different now. Lighter, freer. The dark weight that had hung over Fort Briarwood for so long had finally lifted. When Eva woke up later, resting against the truck seat, the first thing she did was smile. A real, tired but peaceful smile. "It's done," she said. Luke nodded. "You saved all of us." She squeezed his hand weakly. "No. We all saved each other." In the weeks that followed, the ruins of the fort were left to crumble, untouched. The townspeople whispered about strange happenings in the woods that day, but none of them knew the full truth. Eva decided not to claim the land. She didn't want to rebuild what her ancestors had protected. She wanted to let it heal, let it return to the wild place it had once been. Luke stayed by her side, and so did Ben, who became like a little brother to both of them. The three of them found a kind of peace together, bound by everything they had survived. Sometimes, standing by the river, Luke would glance at the old well and wonder what else might be sleeping under the world, waiting. But he didn't worry too much anymore. They had faced the darkness once, and if they had to, he knew they would face it again. Together. As the seasons changed and the first snows dusted the land, Luke thought back to the day he had first stumbled across Eva in the wilderness, saving her from a simple snake bite. Felt like a lifetime ago now. He smiled to himself, watching Eva and Ben skipping stones across the river. Sometimes a single moment, a single choice could change everything. And sometimes that one act of kindness could save not just a life, but the world itself.